In a street race, a Ferrari is seen overtaking cars in an inexplicably supernatural way. He didn't know he was becoming the next target of a curse that would push him to the limit between fame and death. A street racer in search of fame and success comes across an ad that would change his life. A newly restored Ferrari, which he believes is the key to reaching the top of street racing. Determined to claim his place in the racing world, he doesn't hesitate. He uses all his savings, sells his turbocharged car, and buys the vehicle. What he didn't know was that, in addition to acquiring an iconic Ferrari, he was taking on something far darker, a curse that would consume him. Upon seeing the Ferrari for the first time, Enzo notices something peculiar about it. The car emits an almost supernatural glow, as if it has an aura of its own. When he starts the engine, the powerful roar feels like a premonition of something grand, but also strange. He senses a tension in the air, as if the Ferrari has a life of its own. The first time Enzo tests the Ferrari on the streets, he realizes the car is not just fast, it seems to respond with an unnatural precision. Something feels wrong, but he tries to ignore it, thinking he might be imagining things. In his first race, Enzo discovers that the Ferrari not only anticipates his moves, but sometimes takes complete control. He wins, but the feeling that his victory wasn't entirely his own begins to haunt him. His success in the local race makes Enzo believe his rise to the top is guaranteed. He signs up for a bigger, more prestigious event and prepares for the big day. But as the event approaches, the feeling that he is no longer in control of the car grows stronger. The Ferrari seems to guide itself, responding before he even gives commands, as if it has a mind of its own. Suspicious, Enzo takes the car to a local mechanic who helped with the restoration. The mechanic reveals something shocking. The Ferrari was restored after a fatal accident, and its previous owner died after losing control of it. Even with this warning, Enzo doesn't pay much attention. His desire to be the best, to win at any cost, is stronger. On the day of the big race, the car surges forward with relentless force, as if it has a will of its own. He tries to maintain control, but soon realizes he is being driven by something beyond his will. With every turn, the Ferrari pushes its limits, forcing the other competitors further behind in an almost supernatural manner. Enzo, completely immersed in his pursuit of victory, barely notices what is happening around him. As the finish line approaches, Enzo feels an increasing tension. The Ferrari, with its overwhelming power, no longer responds to his commands. He knows the price of victory will be high, but he can't stop now. He accelerates, engulfed in an unexplainable pressure. As the finish line draws near, Enzo realizes he has reached the point of no return. The car crosses the finish line, but the victory is not celebrated. The Ferrari, now completely out of control, keeps accelerating, dragging Enzo toward a dark fate. He tries to turn, but the car no longer obeys. He tries to brake, but the machine ignores his attempts to regain control. The Ferrari is no longer his to command. It leads him forward, and he finds himself being pulled toward an inevitable end. In a final moment, Enzo sees a concrete wall rushing toward him, but the Ferrari does not slow down. The impact is brutal, and Enzo feels his body being crushed by the force of the collision. The car is torn apart in an explosion of metal, glass, and smoke. The engine that once roared with power now falls silent. As the smoke clears, the Ferrari is completely destroyed, yet something strange happens. It still emits a peculiar aura. The car has not been entirely defeated. Somehow, it continues to exude a mysterious energy, as if waiting to be restored once again, for its next driver, its next victim, to continue its cycle of consumption and destruction. News of the accident spreads quickly, but no one truly knows what happened. Some say the car was cursed. Others speak of the tragic fate of those who tried to control it. But the most experienced, Those who had already heard the stories about the Ferrari knew that Enzo would not be the last. The cursed car, with its supernatural power, would continue to lure those with great ambitions, consuming them one by one, without mercy. The legend of the Ferrari does not end with Enzo. It waits, lurking, for another racer who, like Enzo, will not resist the temptation to wield its power. And, as always, the Ferrari will have the final say, dragging yet another soul into its curse. It was autumn in Ravenswood, a small town surrounded by vast cornfields. The harvest was near, and the farmers worked from dawn until dusk. But that year, something was wrong. The animals avoided the fields, and the crows, which normally devoured the crops, had disappeared. The townspeople whispered about a scarecrow they had never seen before, a sinister figure that had appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the cornfield. No one knew who had placed it there. It was different from the other scarecrows that had been erected in the town, taller, draped in black rags, and wearing a tattered straw hat. Its face was a crudely stitched cloth mask with a wide, crooked grin. The eyes, made of buttons, seemed to follow anyone who passed by. The children who played in the field while their parents worked swore they had seen the scarecrow move when no one was looking. The adults laughed but avoided the field at dusk. That night, the young farmer Ethan was returning alone from a neighbor's house. With an old oil lantern in one hand and a scythe slung over his back, he decided to take a shortcut through the cornfield. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the path. The wind blew hard, making the corn leaves whisper like distant voices. Ethan held the lantern tightly, trying to ignore the unease creeping over him as he entered that part of the field. He found the scarecrow in the center of the cornfield, exactly as the townspeople had described. Up close, it was even more terrifying. The black rags swayed in the wind, and the stitched grin seemed to stretch wider under the lantern's flickering light. Ethan shivered but brushed it off. "It's just a pile of straw," he murmured, trying to convince himself. The field was pristine, with no signs of animals or pests. It was as if something or someone was protecting the land from anything living. Ethan walked past the scarecrow, but then he heard a strange sound, like something heavy falling to the ground. When he turned back, the scarecrow was lying in the dirt. He hesitated, but curiosity got the better of him. He decided to investigate. As he approached, Ethan noticed that the scarecrow's rags looked darker, almost as if they were damp. He reached out to touch it, but before he could react, something happened. The scarecrow moved. Its straw arms lifted with a dry creak, and the button eyes gleamed with a deep, menacing red. Ethan stumbled backward, but the scarecrow grabbed him with supernatural strength, its straw fingers tightening around the young man's throat. Still holding the lantern, he threw it against the scarecrow's tattered body. The oil spread quickly, and flames began to consume the figure. The fire crackled, illuminating the field with a bright, crimson glow. The scarecrow let out a guttural, almost human sound as the flames lifted its rags. Ethan seized the chance to break free, but even burning, the scarecrow remained standing. Desperate, Ethan grabbed the scythe from his back and swung it violently at the scarecrow's chest. The blade sank deep into the creature, but it didn't fall. Instead, the scarecrow, now furious, pulled the scythe from its own body and with a swift, precise motion, struck Ethan's collarbone. The young man screamed in pain, feeling the warm blood seep down his body. The blow was so strong that he collapsed to the ground, writhing in agony. The scarecrow, still partially aflame, grabbed Ethan by his clothes and dragged him deeper into the cornfield. The earth there was disturbed, as if someone had recently dug a hole. An open, old, and rotting coffin lay in the soil. The scarecrow tossed Ethan and his scythe inside and began covering the coffin with dirt as the young man screamed in terror. When the last grain of soil covered the coffin, the scarecrow returned to its place in the middle of the field, motionless, as if nothing had happened. But its grin now seemed wider, more satisfied. The flames had died out, leaving only scorch marks on its blackened rags. Days passed since Ethan disappeared. The townspeople, already wary of the cornfield, now avoided it entirely. The young farmer was never seen again, neither by neighbors nor by the other workers in the region. The scarecrow now bore new scars. Its black rags were partially burned, with charred edges that looked like they had been licked by flames. And its stitched grin seemed wider, crueler, as if it were laughing at anyone who dared to look. No one dared to approach. The children, who once played at the edges of the cornfield, were now kept away by their parents. The farmers refused to harvest that part of the field, leaving the corn to rot under the sinister figure's watchful gaze. The scarecrow continued to stand guard over Ethan and the field, waiting for new victims to cross its path. In the small town of Black Hollow, there was a road known for its sharp curves and for being the most dangerous in the region, shrouded in dark legends. The Black Raven Road was avoided by everyone after sunset. The elders spoke of a vengeful spirit, a ghostly rider engulfed in spectral flames, who hunted down those who dared to cross his path. It is said that many years ago, a man used to ride that road on his modified motorcycle, challenging death at every turn. One night, while fleeing from the police, he lost control and crashed into an old oak tree. His body was never found, only the twisted remains of his bike, still reeking of burnt fuel. Since then, truckers and travelers have sworn they've seen a fiery silhouette in their rear-view mirrors, speeding toward them, only to vanish into the darkness. One night, a young pizza delivery boy entered Black Raven Road exactly at midnight, carrying an order. At first, everything seemed normal. Only the sound of the wind cutting through the empty road filled the silence. But then, an unnatural cold took over the air. His engine sputtered, and a strong smell of burning gasoline filled his lungs. On the horizon, an eerie orange glow appeared. Daniel glanced into his rearview mirror and saw a terrifying figure, a rider engulfed in flames, clad in char black leather, with eyes glowing like embers. He was speeding toward him, closing the distance at an unnatural pace. Panic took hold of the delivery boy. He twisted the throttle, tried to escape, but the phantom rider was already by his side. The creature slowly turned his head and whispered in a guttural, hollow voice, "Do you dare challenge the path of the dead?" The phantom rider's flaming motorcycle surged forward, opening a path like a herald of hell. To Daniel's horror, his own bike, which had been failing, now gained speed as if pulled by an unseen force. The speedometer shot up, and he realized he no longer had control. The throttle turned on its own, and the brakes were useless. The phantom rider raised his skeletal hand. In the blink of an eye, everything around them turned black. As the darkness lifted, Daniel saw a massive, twisted oak tree looming ahead. He tried to turn, but it was too late. With a brutal impact, his bike slammed into the ancient trunk, the sound of crumpling metal echoing to the cursed road. Then silence, only the distant roar of a flaming motorcycle fading into the night. The next morning, his bike was found lying by the roadside. His body was never recovered. On the asphalt, A scorch mark outlined the silhouette of a rider and his motorcycle, as if a shadow of fire had been burned into the road itself. Since that night, locals whisper that on moonless nights, a distant roar could be heard coming from Black Raven Road. If you're foolish enough to try and cross it, be warned. For the Phantom Rider is always searching for new souls to claim. And once he chooses you, there is no escape.